We were gone, but now we're back. We got some lost ancient texts to talk about. Greek mythology nerds. Sit up when I'm talking to you. Alright, so a lot of y'all know about the Trojan War. Trojan guy captures a Greek guy's wife, goes back to his crazy well-protected hometown of Troy. Greeks come knocking, don't stop knocking for 10 years. The gods take sides. Achilles is there for a while, and then he dies. The Greeks fake out like they left and gave the city of Troy a statue of a horse. But, spoilers I guess, the horse is hiding some Greeks who sneak out of the horse, open the gates of Troy, burn it to the ground, everybody goes home. Takes some people longer than others. If you're really into Greek mythology, you know we got these stories from two places, two poems called the Iliad and the Odyssey, both written by Homer, both composed about 700 or 800 BCE. Everything I told you above we know from these two poems, except here's the thing. No, we don't. Alright, I'm going to introduce you to a concept called a literary cycle. A literary cycle is a group of stories that revolve around certain characters. The Iliad and the Odyssey are two stories in something called the epic cycle. The epic cycle tells, obviously in more detail, the story of the Trojan War. But if you've only heard of two of the stories in the epic cycle, the Iliad and the Odyssey, how many stories in total are there in the cycle? Usually 8. And before you ask, yeah, I'm going to do a video for each one. But also, why have you heard of the Iliad and the Odyssey and not the Aethiopus or the Iliopursis or the Telegony? We lost them. What do you mean you lost them? Well, we're not 100%, but we're pretty sure the Iliad and the Odyssey were the first stories written in the cycle. Don't quote me on this. And the other ones were prequels, sequels, etc. that were written later. It's like, remember when Infinity War came out and they teased Captain Marvel at the end, and then they came out with Captain Marvel as a prequel, and it turned out that she'd been up there the whole time? Yeah, it's a little like that. But we're not talking Captain Marvel here. How do we lose an entire cycle of mythology? Well, people didn't like them as much as the Iliad and the Odyssey. So they didn't get written down as often. When they did get written down, it was on, like, papyrus, which doesn't last a long time. Remember, this is centuries before the printing press. People aren't going to write stuff down without a good reason. So do we know what was in the stories we lost? I'm so glad you asked. Yes, we do. Here's how. Alright, I'm going to teach you a new word. You ready? Chrestomathy. A chrestomathy is a collection of passages from a culture's literature for the purpose of studying that culture's language. The word chrestomathy comes from the Greek words Christos, which means useful, and mantano, which means to learn. At some point, hundreds of years after the whole epic cycle was written, but still like 2,000 years ago, a guy named Proclus wrote a chrestomathy for the Greek language, which, side note, Greek language back then, not the same as Greek language today. Anyway, when he gathered a bunch of passages for people to study, guess what he pulled from? That's right. That's how we know most of what's in the epic cycle, because we still have the chrestomathy and the passages he quoted from the stuff we lost. We also use context clues in the Iliad and the Odyssey. For example, the Trojan horse is not in the Iliad, and they only mention it once or twice in the Odyssey. Someone else came along later and wrote that part of the cycle in more detail. You're right, it is like fan fiction. In fact, a much bigger part of classic literature than you'd think is actually fan fiction. But, I'm just not ready to have that conversation with you guys yet. Gotta need something to eat.